Hey everybody, nom nom nom. Welcome to Black Spring. Well, at some point, America has to wake up to the con. I mean, politicians, people in our government, they actually tell you exactly what they are thinking all of the time. However, most Americans have conceded to or have been conditioned and also have been tolerant of the amount of ignorance, the amount of fiscal irresponsibility, and the amount of shadow agenda that's actually out there. Even Joe Biden in his address. You have global health governance, climate change, wealth redistribution. All of these things are under the guise of glittery generalizations on Marxist ideology, equality, race, identity politics, liberation theories, climate change, utopia, and class warfare. Everything's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Don't look at my wealth or my constituents. Just listen to me. Well, the media and the propaganda soldiers teach every day. Teach their faithful populace and generations to come to look for disparities, isms, phobias, iniquities, white guilt, and more. Many of these communist tactics on division and class warfare, even during a health pandemic. Now, I'll bring you this quote that I've heard many times, but the quote, never let a good crisis go to waste. And that came from Rahm Emanuel. Now, the particular politician at hand here is a politician who has a net worth of well above millions of dollars, let's say. I've heard everything from 16 to 100 million plus dollars. Meanwhile, her constituents live on needle and feces infested streets and live in squalor. So, question is, what other subversions of human and natural rights are in this bill? We get another Patriot Act. I mean, you would think she was the president of the United States, that she was directing traffic based on the address at hand here. This is, I mean, it's a 1404-page bill, roughly. If you review it, you pretty much need a shovel, ladies and gentlemen, to go through it. I mean, it's like you would think she was parroting FDR. Well, and of course her mantra is, we have to pass the bill to find out what's in it, e.g. the Affordable Health Care Act. So, they call it the Take Responsibility for Families and Workers Act. But first, let me tip my hat to the shadow agenda and the Pope, who has a globalist agenda. All right, so during a pontification academy last year, Pope Francis warned attendees that sovereign nations attempting to govern themselves will find they are unable to protect their populations from a myriad menaces abroad in the world. Quote, the nation state is no longer able to procure the common good of its populations alone. The common good has become global and nations must associate for their own benefit, Francis said. Now, I will provide the quote for you as well as the actual article that this comes from. It actually comes from our vetted source, the TNA. I'll provide you with that. And of course, our speaker, Pelosi, she tips her hat to the Pope before she gives you she gives you her allegiance. She tips her hat to the Pope, to the globalists, to the agenda, to the UN agenda on sustainability. And she'll go into many, many components. And she leaves out a lot. This bill is over 1,400 pages long. There's everything from, it's basically the welfare state, a welfare state bill. And to me, there even seems to be, there's a huge gap. There's going to be American privacy violations. There's going to be bureaus and everything looking into every single aspect of American life in this particular bill. It's also, of course, we all have to keep in mind that, that the climate change, to me, is, in my opinion, is the other candidate. And I said that last year, that climate change is the other candidate, because all of these elites assume that they're going to be profitable if this Green New Deal becomes passed. Okay? And of course, the liberals and the progressives are all about using the American taxpayer money to subsidize the whole world. The president ended up making a mention of it when a reporter asked him, I paraphrase, was there any money in the actual bill to help other countries? Well, those countries will be receiving assistance from a medical supply and a medical aspect, but it wouldn't be included in an American stimulus bill, which is based on the 2018 taxpayer. So no, he's basically saying yes, but not this particular bill those appropriations would not be included in this particular bill. So of course they have to use the all-purpose devil President Trump and their litmus test on immigration, and they have to drive their xenophobic frame home and create their narratives for their stories the next day. So here, you notice that the speaker, she's not looking to the Constitution. That particular party does not look to the Constitution for their guidance. They are a fiscally irresponsible Congress. Pelosi has an 18% rate of voting within her constitutional oath of office, and she's always touting allegiance to something, but it's certainly not to the Constitution. In fact, she always opens up, she enters, oh, we have to be bold and forward looking, and not to mention, she highlighted for our democracy, which for the record, historically, we are not a pure democracy. This is a constitutional republic. And our voting process reflects that. Hence the reason they want to get rid of the Electoral College. Well, also, I've spoken to this before here on Black Spring. I always try to emphasize where our power is in terms of the American citizen power is actually at its lowest level, in which is the county and the city. Well, with politicians like Pelosi, your power is going more and more centralized government. And if they have their way, it will be more globally. You're going to end up with a global governance. That's also, it's very auspicious. This health pandemic is very auspicious for a global health governance. In fact, I gave you another example earlier in this week in which the CBS News, or CBS, is actually tipped their hat to President Xi Jinping about how he handled the pandemic. So you got people you got these there's a lot of shadow going on here. A lot of shadow promotion, a lot of public and private partnerships, and you got global partnerships that are pushing agendas into even the American pandemic right now. And yes, I do believe the president is a wartime president, but his allies are shadows. They're shadow allies. And he has to be ready for shadow boxer. You got to be ready for what they might do. But it's so difficult when you're surrounded by this Congress, this 116th Congress that's constitutionally irresponsible and fiscally irresponsible, and they're growing these huge government programs. I tell you, if you go, we'll take a brief look at this particular, just scan through this bill, but it's huge. In fact, I even believe there's a pay raise for the Congress inside of this. There's tons of things in that bill. You go A to Z. All right, so just briefly here, she mentions, quoting OSHA, the PPE. She's expanding on what they need. Talks about tax cuts, credits, and income tax credits, and students' loans, and schools and universities. That's another UN agenda tactic, is to basically them to control and dictate what goes on in education worldwide, and that's including America. She also talks about guaranteeing pay and family leave, talks about shoring up SNAP programs, and not to mention, you guys take a look at the UN agenda. Go to the UN page. I believe it's un.gov. I'll get it for you. However, she's talking about our democracy and requiring early voting and voting by mail and same-day voter registrations. Yeah, it's dense. Okay, you need a shovel. Then also this stuff goes into ballot harvesting, something that's familiar on the West Coast. Okay, so those just a few things that she mentions in there. But and of course she's mocking and quoting being prayerful again. She's so prayerful, and above all, this is a bill that like any other. Nobody. I guess she thinks nobody's going to read it, which I think the chances are pretty high. Which is irresponsible, and it's pretty ignorant. We've become tolerant of this kind of ignorance in Congress. So you may want to take a look at something. I'm just going to give you a brief clip here. I'd like to thank everybody again for being here with me on this segment of Black Spring, and I hope everybody's having a great day. I'm going to give you a brief on the speaker, and then I will provide you the link to look at the actual bill. We might even scroll a little bit through that, but I'd like to thank everybody for joining me here on this segment of Black Spring with Autumn.
Top-rated UI designer right here.
Stands today among the great pillars of American health and financial security: Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and the Affordable Care Act. Now we find ourselves in the depths of one of the most serious health and economic emergencies our nation has ever faced. The protections of the Affordable Care Act are more important now than ever. But right now, in the middle of the coronavirus, the Trump administration is in court suing to tear down the entire Affordable Care Act, every last protection and benefit. If President Trump succeeds in striking down the ACA in court, gone is the ban on insurers putting limits on your health care. Gone are guaranteed essential health benefits and free preventive services. Gone are young people staying on their parents' insurance until age 26. Gone is the health insurance of 20 million Americans. And gone are the life-saving protections for more than 130 million Americans with pre-existing conditions. Today, therefore, I'm calling on President Trump to abandon his lawsuit seeking to strike down the Affordable Care Act. Instead, the president should urge the 14 states who have refused to expand Medicaid to do so. Last Thursday, Pope Francis offered the world this prayer: enlighten those responsible for the common good so that they might know how to care for those entrusted to their responsibility. Today, House Democrats are unveiling the Take Responsibility for Workers and Families Act, a bill that takes responsibility for the health, wages, and well-being of America's workers. Democrats take responsibility for our workers. We require that any corporation that takes taxpayer dollars must protect their workers' wages and benefits, not CEO pay, stock buybacks, or layoffs. We strengthen unemployment insurance so that it can replace the average wages of our workers who are losing their jobs and hours. For our small businesses, we provide fast relief with grants and loans to tide them through this crisis. For our doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, and first responders in hospitals and other health institutions, we provide desperately needed funds to care for those who are sick and to ensure that our providers have personal protective equipment, PPE, that they need. We protect our healthcare workers by requiring the administration to enforce our stronger OSHA protections. For our families, we give direct payments to America's families in a robust way and strengthen the child tax credits and the earned income tax credit. We give more workers the security of guaranteed paid family and medical leave, including those caring for our seniors. And we make the coronavirus treatment free for the patient. For our students, we provide emergency funds for our schools and universities. We help current borrowers with their student debt burden and the GI Bill benefits. We bolster SNAP and other initiatives to address food insecurity. For our democracy, we ensure that states can carry out this year's election and require early voting and vote by mail. I'm grateful to our committee chairs and members for their extraordinary leadership and work for America's workers and families. The Senate Republican bill put corporations first, but because of the insistence of Leader Chuck Schumer and Senate Democrats, progress has been made. We urge the Senate to move closer to the values in the Take Responsibility for Workers and Families Act. We must be bold and forward-looking in our thinking. We must be swift and evidence-based in our actions, and we must be prayerful. God bless the families of those who have lost loved ones and those fighting this terrible illness.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me for this segment of Black Spring with Autumn. But I will tell you, generally, I wanted to stop it there because here you go. You go into the virtue signaling and harnessing all of her mockery. But aside from that, you can see she's not mentioning all these things. There's provisions in there for carbon footprint, solar holding the feet of the airline industry to regulations. There's a whole lot of regulations in this bill. There's also illegal immigration, illegal, visa extensions, more people onto the system. She actually means take responsibility for the world and wealth redistribution in this particular bill. So here again, get your shovel out. We can take a brief look at this particular. Bill, so you can have fun with it on your own. But it's a very hefty bill. I have to say so myself. It's not something that you're going to, spend your Saturday or your Friday night on, or, well, we're all quarantined, so why not read it? So you got, she's talked about voter, this is politicizing. It's an election year. You've got, of course, I'm sure you'll find even more things in this particular bill, but this bill is actually available to you online. I will plug it in for the actual comments. Comments and plug it into the actual information box of this particular segment of Black Spring with Autumn. I'd like to thank everybody for being here, but as you can see, there's also something in here for drinking water, for low-income household drinking water and wastewater assistance appropriations. There's tons, it's beyond alphabet soup at this point. It's a welfare state. It's a dependency bill. They tether all of this. There's even something for Native Americans. I mean, you will never, you just have to then go through this thing. Providing Bureau of the Census access to institutions of higher education. You see, there you go. This kind of poking into transparency here is on the rise. Temporary fiscal relief for states and localities. I mean, the list goes on and on. Something about making payments to Indian tribes. Here you go, millions of dollars. Direct payments to units of local government. I mean, this is, if this is not fiscal irresponsibility, I don't know. I mean, they have enumerated powers, ladies and gentlemen. The Congress has enumerated powers. General welfare, as well as the defense, is where they have limitations on what they can do. This is unconstitutional, to say the least. Of course, I will provide this link for you. And I appreciate everybody for tuning into this segment. And please leave your comments, concerns, and much, much more in the box. I appreciate you for tuning in. Also hit the like, subscribe, or unlike button. And I encourage you to, get your thinking up during this quarantine time. Maybe ask some questions. Maybe find out the history of your party or your conviction. Maybe find out, who knows, something that provokes thought. What will that do? Some say it's too late. I'm not sure I'm convinced of that, but I think it's our responsibility. And I appreciate you for tuning into this segment of Black Spring with Autumn. Have a great Tuesday.